Quickly, just to mention noise suppression systems. This is an extremely rare photograph of a Donne Denouement with a sound suppression system. And this system was developed by none other than Le Prière, in the same manner did the rockets. It was developed at the French naval bases and was tested in the north of France. It was very successful, but the end of the war brought it to an end. The only other stealth aircraft, depending on sound suppression, was the X-26. This is a Schweizer glider and was fitted with an engine driving the propeller over the nose. And this particular aircraft was tested at Roth Field. Yep. And I'm told by people who were there that if it flew overhead, you did not hear it. It was then modified by Lockheed to the Y-03 and flown over the jungles of Vietnam at night using infrared sensors to pick up troops. Now, I don't know if sound suppression systems have gone further than this. There's rumors F-117 has one. I've not been able to verify it. Helicopters. Now, let me explain helicopters. I'm not talking about a helicopter that you may have had in the first air cab. It doesn't take off and fly around. You're not going to get that in World War I. So we're talking here about vertical takeoff, one-man observation platforms. First is the Papa Nui of 1915. This has a gnome engine at the front, driving that propeller around at the rate of 60 times per minute. And the pilot sits in the thick center of the aircraft and takes off vertically. Control is obtained by use of that air ejected from that tube. It was tested in 1916 before a government mission, and the minute it got a ground effect, it crashed. And that should have been the end of it. But in the 1950s, the Air Force decided they wanted a similar idea, and so they were going to have the Avro car, built by a Canadian firm, under contract. And this aircraft was also designed to take off vertically, although it was hoped one day it could fly, which it could fly. And that's an important picture because that's as high as it ever got off the ground. Once it got out of ground effect, it would crash. The only other difference between the Papa Nui and the Avro car is the Papa Nui was presented to the government for free, and this thing cost the American $93 million. One of the most ingenious designs of the First World War is the PKZ helicopter. This is an Austro-Hungarian design. It has 3 rotary engines, and these are known, so they're replaced by Lerone engines. It powers a common shaft with counter-rotating propellers. This is designed to replace barrage balloons. Now, barrage balloons need a lot of infrastructure, need a lot of anti-aircraft, they need gas generating plants. You don't need it with this. You take it off, it goes into the air, you look around, come back down. If there's any fighters coming, it should be very quick and simple. The problem is, the minute it gets out of ground effect, like the other things, it gets unstable. So what they did was they attached tethers to those ballonets, and they would hold it down to try to keep it, the wind from blowing it. This aircraft was never flown with a man on board. It was tested without that cupola on top, and the one time it was tested for commission, it got up to about, I think, 150 meters, and then it became unstable and crashed. Now, it was a promising design, but in 1918, Austro-Hungary had other problems in developing helicopters, but at least shows the way of the future. Cut to 1950, and we have the Hiller VZ-1, which also has contra-rotating propellers, each driven by an individual motor. And this is a personal transportation system designed to go up in the air. The soldiers will look around, or it can be used as a sniper's post. It also be used, if it was controlled properly, to fly over minefields. Now, it was controlled by kinesiology. And kinesiology means the pilot bent his body right and left to make it go where he wanted to go. Now, it was presented to the Army, and the Army decided 2 engines is enough. They want 3, they want triple redundancy, so if one engine fails, the thing's not going to spin out of control. And so after they modified it, it looked like this. And no one was ever going to be able to control that with their body weight, and that ended the experimentation. So I would have to say helicopters were a failure in World War I, but they're equally a failure in post-war. So let's call this an evolutionary dead end and move on. Variable incidence. Variable incidence wings have some use. The Newports had a variable incidence wing, not widely recognized. You see that V-shaped strut as it comes to the end? It's rotating around a half ring. And so on the ground, you would adjust the incidence of the wing depending on fuel, armament, number of crew, so forth. Yeah, it turned out to be cumbersome. It wasn't worth doing. So basically, they abandoned it. Although a lot of Newport aircraft still have the V-shaped wing because more or less a company trademark. The first aircraft to be fitted with a variable incidence wing was the Paul Schmidt series. It was developed in 1915 as the SBR, and then the Army liked it enough that it gave us limited production order, sort of a backup to their main preferred aircraft type. And historians, myself included, always assumed that it was a variable incidence aircraft. But John Davilla, who I corresponded with while I was working on the French World War I book, told me that wasn't the case, and the Army didn't like it and they wanted to delete it. But you can clearly see those wheels on the top, so it was not deleted, and this is the operational version of Paul Schmidt 7. So all I can tell you, it does have the mechanism for variable incidence, but I can't say that it was actually used. But it is the first variable incidence aircraft to get into operational service. There's one other in history, and that is the aircraft I showed you earlier, the Chancellor Crusader. You notice it's coming in with the wing handle. The reason for this is a high wing model. So you're coming in at a very high angle. Now normally that would be a big deal, but try landing on a carrier. Ask Jack, he'll tell you it's not easy. And coming in at a high angle, not being able to see the deck is not a good idea. So they ingeniously kept the fuselage level, and they varied the incidence of the wing. Very successful idea of work. And so only 2 aircraft in history of variable incidence wings that got into combat. Paul Schmidt 7 of 1917, and about 50 years later, the Chancellor Crusader. Drones and guided missiles. Confused title because this subject confuses me. I'm not sure what you call a drone or what you call a guided missile. So I'm going to say a drone is an aircraft that takes up, off under control, flies under control, and lands under control. We accept that definition. The first aircraft in history that was a drone was a Voisin-10, which in 1919 was turned over to a scientific institute and flew under control. That is the only time I'm going to mention drones. The rest of this talk is now we're going to talk about guided missiles. Guided missiles in World War I are interesting. This is a British design. This is a swap with AT. It's called AT because it stands for aerial target, and it's designed to confuse the enemy because it's really a flying bomb. And you see it wrapped around the fuselage. If the resolution's good enough, you see cable around there, and that's actually designed to pick up transmissions from the ground. This design was not successful. There are others that were slightly more successful, but none of them came close to being in operational service as guided missiles. Sperry came up with some Jack's book, his book on World War I aircraft. Sperry also came up with a similar design, and it too suffered from the fact that the technology just wasn't mature enough to be used at that point in time. The idea was resurrected of a flying bomb by the Navy in 1944, and this is the Interstate TDK-1 drone. It has a pilot right now, but when it lands in its space, you take off the nose, you put on a charge, and you take it off with an F6F Hellcat controller, and you fly to the target, and you drop it. Yes, these were used operationally in Okinawa. They found that the control was too weak. It didn't hit the target. If it did hit the target, it didn't do that much damage. But at least it's an interesting side note of aviation history that was tried. Germans did a little better. This is the Aviation FI-103, otherwise known as the V-1. It is a flying bomb, and it's a flying robot bomb. It wasn't a radio control, though. They used a timer to cut off the fuel supply so it would crash when they thought it was over a target. However, I will give it this, it was by far more destructive, far more cost-effective than the stablemate, the V-2. One of the most ingenious designs of World War I is the Siemens-Schuckert's guide bomb. This is an aircraft that basically consists of a torpedo with a monocoque shell biplane wing. You drop it from the Zeppelin and play out a very, very long guide wire from the Zeppelin, and it's controlled so it gets closer to the ship it's going to attack. Then it splits open, the torpedo falls out, and hit the ship. Nope, never used operationally. It was right at the end of the war, but they did get that cable up out to 5 miles before it broke. Promising design, a really good idea, and the Germans didn't forget it. Because in World War II, they developed a series of weapons, most of which used a guide wire type system. But they also have the Fritz X bomb. This is a guided bomb guided by radio signals. This is a Henkel 111 test aircraft, but it was actually flown into combat by the Dornier 217s and KG-100, an elite bomber unit of the Luftwaffe. Now, these aircraft had a moment of glory. They were flown to the target. The target was the Italian fleet that was surrendering. Now, the Italian fleet surrendering to the Allies could upset the balance of power in the Mediterranean, so they had to stop their ships. They attacked with these bombs using the radio signals and sank several Italian ships. Most importantly, most famously, the battleship, Rome. It's a super battleship. And that's their moment of fame.